Out there, in the middle of the ocean, safety isn't just some rule book, it's literally a lifeline. And today, we're going to talk about the unsung guardians who are holding that line day in and day out.
So what really separates a safe trip from a total disaster at sea? Is it the fancy new tech? The captain's years of experience? Maybe the weather? Yeah, all that stuff is super important for sure. But the real difference, more often than you'd think, comes down to one person. The person right there on the front line. Let me show you what I mean with a scenario that, believe me, happens way too often.
Okay, picture this. It's 2:30 in the morning. You're out on the open sea. The bridge is dead quiet, except for that low hum of the instruments, kind of like a lullaby. Everything seems calm, totally normal.
The officer of the watch spots another ship way out on the horizon. They give a totally routine command to the helmsman, a simple turn to port, just a few degrees. It's an order they've probably done 1,000 times.
But something's not right. The ship's bow starts to swing, but it's going the wrong way. It's turning to starboard, straight towards the other vessel. And just like that, the quiet on the bridge is shattered. Pure panic.
So what just happened? A single mistake, one tiny moment of inattention, and they almost had a full-blown catastrophe on their hands. It really shows you just how thin that line of safety is at sea, and it brings us right to the person at the heart of it all. All right, let's talk about the ship's backbone, the role of the rating. Because that person, the helmsman with their hands on the wheel, they're a rating. And their job is one of the most vital, and maybe one of the most overlooked, parts of keeping a ship safe.
So, what exactly is a rating? Well, to put it simply, they're the non-officer crew members. You've got the officers who plan things and give the commands, right? But the ratings, they're the ones who are actually physically carrying out those orders. Our source material calls them the tulang punggung. It's an Indonesian term, and it means the backbone. And honestly, that's the perfect word for it.
Take a look at this. It's a simple breakdown of the chain of command. You've got your master and the officers up at the top, making all the big decisions. But look down at the foundation. That's where you find the ratings, the able seamen, the ordinary seamen. They're the ones doing the hard physical work. A captain's order is only as good as the person who actually carries it out.
And when it comes to safety, their role is just massive. I mean, they're the ones hands-on during really high-risk stuff like mooring and anchoring. They spend the most time out on deck, so they're usually the first to spot any kind of hazard. And if there's an emergency, we're talking fire, man overboard, you name it, they are the first responders. They are literally the guardians of the ship's physical safety.
Okay, so to really get the weight of this responsibility, we have to look at what happens when things go wrong. Let's dive into the anatomy of a mistake with two pretty chilling case studies.
So for our first case study, let's talk about the misheard command. This goes right back to that story we started with. And believe me, it's a classic and terrifyingly common breakdown on the bridge.
So the officer gives the command, port 5, but in that low hum of the bridge, perhaps distracted for just a split second, the helmsman hears starboard 5. He acts on it immediately, just as he's trained to do.
But here's the thing. The intended command was port 5. The action taken was starboard 5. The consequence? The ship veered right into the path of another vessel, and they were inches from a collision. This just hammers home how critical one simple procedure is: the read back. The helmsman is supposed to repeat the order before they do anything. It's a simple habit, a small bit of discipline that prevents this exact kind of disaster.
All right, on to our second case. This one is about the ignored light. This involves another core duty of a rating on watch, and that's being the lookout. And let's be clear, maritime law says you must have a proper lookout at all times. So the lookout sees a faint light off in the distance, and he thinks to himself, it's probably just a shore light. He's tired, it's late, and he makes a fatal assumption. He figures it's no big deal, not worth bothering the bridge about. He doesn't report it.
Look, the correct procedure is simple. It's the #1 rule of being a lookout. Report every light, every sound, every object, no matter how small it seems. But the action taken was to assume it wasn't a threat. The consequence? A collision with a small fishing vessel that the radar didn't even pick up. The human eye, that lookout, was the last line of defense, and it failed.
So, what are we really talking about here? These aren't equipment failures, they're human failures. Let's dig into the real cause at sea, the human factor.
Which brings up a big question, right? Why do trained professionals make these kinds of errors? I mean, these are certified seafarers. Why do they make such basic, fundamental mistakes?
Well, here's the thing. It's almost never about a lack of skill. It's about the human factor. And that boils down to two things, really: fatigue and a simple lapse in discipline. And let's be really clear about fatigue. This isn't just about feeling a little tired or sleepy. It's a direct threat to safety. It makes it harder to concentrate. It slows down your reaction time. You start making poor decisions. You can't assess risk properly. You start ignoring alarms or skipping standard procedures. A tired brain always looks for a shortcut. And out on the ocean, shortcuts can get you killed.
Okay, so if the human factor is the problem, then what's the solution? Well, it all comes down to the Guardian's commitment. Discipline saves lives.
There's a line from our source material that just says it all. Serious accidents often start from simple things: a rope handled incorrectly, unclear communication, or neglected safety procedures. Think about that. The biggest disasters don't start with some huge explosion. They start small, a tiny crack in discipline.
And that's really the heart of it, isn't it? At sea, discipline isn't a choice. It is the lifeline that protects every single person on board. Look, on land, a lack of discipline might get you in a bit of trouble. At sea, it gets people killed. This isn't about being overly strict for no reason. It's a professional promise, a commitment to the rules that keep everybody safe. It's the whole crew's lifeline.
So that leaves us with one final question, and it's a personal one. As the ship's first line of defense, will your discipline hold? When you're tired, when the job feels boring and repetitive, when you think no one is watching, will you stick to the procedure? Because you are the first line of defense, and sometimes you're the last.